Okay, I call the utilities meeting to order. We have Mike Reichert, myself, Doc Fellner. Can I have a motion to excuse him?
Yes, I'd make that motion.
I'll second that. Did you read the minutes?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the May 5th regular meeting.
I'll second that. Approval of the agenda is published.
We have anything to add to this? Anybody?
We'll
Nope.
make it work.
Oh, that's right,
special.
it's a special. My apologies. I'll make a motion to approve the published agenda.
Okay, we'll just go right into A on our discussion items, meter replacement.
I'll try to start on that and we'll get into a discussion. First of all, thank you for moving from Wednesday to Thursday. That's, 7:30 is kind of an irregular time for us, but I was out of town and I did want to address a few issues. When I talked to Mark about that, I wasn't sure that we could fix the specific issue with the lateral, the private sewers of the laterals, without council action, but I know we've come up with a good way to take care of that specific situation, and that's probably best discussed as letter B on the agenda. So I'll stop right there by saying, I thought we need to be able to push, it's a bad verb, move out of committee, some sort of council action on making that replacement on South Union. So I'll detail the plan real quickly if that's.
That's fine. So we're on B then.
Yeah, we can do B and then go back to meter replacement.
Okay.
Let's start with the neighborhoods, because that's kind of our responsibility first. As there's a little packet, we'll make it available to people who want that highlights. And this is at I think our office staff had 5 or 6 hours to kind of identify these areas that either we know or we suspect have common laterals. I don't want to incite people whose situation the city intends to fix, but the concern that was brought up over the last couple of weeks, I think has caused us to look at how many other situations and whether council wants to change our policy, our approach to these private sewers. I guess to cut to the chase, I think we probably should look at that. I think that a lot of these are older. I think as a practical matter, there's no paperwork or limited paperwork. What we found on the specific cases, there's no easement to be there. And so from my point of view, you get into a lot of you said, I said, that kind of stuff. And that a better approach from the city is to say, all of these areas that are either yellow or blue, we should see the condition of those common sewers and then attempt to, or not attempt, but to rank them. And then initially use some of the allocation from the rescue plan to address that. And if that doesn't get us far enough to take care of any chronic problems that we know about now, then I think council will have to look at a longer term, more permanent way to take care, if you will, take over those sewers.
How many do we know of right now?
Well, I don't know, you have to count up the lots, but this is
I mean, how many?
have popped up since this.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know.
I can tell you of one specific incident last week. So the one that we've been discussing on your front page is marked with a little star.
Right.
So if you go directly northwest to that big yellow block, So at Walnut and Boston, had a call last week, a shared lateral on that block was having issues and asked that we come out and just look at our side to make sure the issue's not on our side before they called someone. Because she said, I'm fully aware it's a shared lateral and we'll take care of it, but before I call someone, just wouldn't rule out that it's not on the city's side. So within the last week, in a 1 block radius, we've had one pop up. I did ask around a little bit. I talked to Gary Jenkins. I talked to a local contractor and just said, best guess, how many of these are we talking about around town? I said, are we talking about a couple dozen, 50, 100? And he said, 100 is probably more in the ballpark.
Which I don't think, the 14,000 roughly, for us on the specific case that brought all this to our attention, that's about what that'll cost. We had some other quotes that this was, so I'm not sure if that becomes a rule of thumb, but there's a manhole and there's 850 roughly foot of new pipe. And the idea is not to fix what I will, I'll argue till
Property.
it's, right, we're not fixing private property. We're gonna put a public line in and tap in those people. I don't think we can compel them, but we should. I don't think it'll come to that. Because initially, especially over the next year or two, you're gonna see the worst case situations come up. And so this is not it's just a way to take this map and look at the streets, see where our red lines, where our sewers are, and then you get an idea of like, wow, that likely doesn't have an individual service. So under B, I think one of the uses that we should allocate the city's dollars for is some sort of replacement program.
Do we know what's gonna happen with that yet, or how much we're gonna get?
It, as I'm sure you probably read, it shrunk quite a bit. And spent a lot of time talking about how the townships at the state level got themselves dealt into the divvying up or the allocating the funds. We thought that we were gonna get 1.8 million in 2 different tranches, isn't that
Yeah.
the word? 2 different chunks of money. It looks like we're down to 1.2, which is a pretty significant cut. And I think there's little that will happen to change that. Maybe the jurisdictions that don't spend, that's what I had said when I sent some text to our reps. Like under the CARES Act, when the local townships didn't use their money, then there was a reallocation. I think we got 83,000, something like that. Sort of as pushed it back out to the community. This stuff, the rescue plan money is not that way. The way that, as I understand it, the General Assembly passed. Excuse me. So anyway, I think one of the uses needs to be deciding, sort of measuring up how much this is going to be in terms of the worst private sewers. And I think most of the time we'll find that we can go in and put a public line in somewhere in the overall layout of these properties. So that's one use. I think we've said from the start, Nikki and I, and looking at it, that a big portion of this needs to go to water plant improvements, water system improvements.
That's what I was gonna say,
Right.
because don't we have some pretty big EPA they want done?
Well, Mark,
Yeah.
funny you should mention that.
Right.
that sort of rolls into A too, but, there's some pretty big repairs that need to be out there. Powers and Eamon both have impending issues, so, yeah. Like Tom said, system-wide plant in reservoirs, distribution system.
How old is our plant? Well, let me reword that. When was the last time our plant was updated and how
Yeah.
old overall?
About 20 years.
20 years.
And as you get more and more into it, I think that replacement cycle, the way we treat surface water, and this is another rule of thumb, that every 20 years, you're gonna have to make major improvements. What we're finding on the EPA report is a need to improve record keeping, the documentation of what's done and when it's done in terms of regular prevention and maintenance. So the PM, you're gonna find when that report comes out that that's a big issue. Nikki mentioned it leads into the other issue of meter replacement. One of the most specific findings, it's kind of interesting, it is Ohio EPA's domain, debate whether that's right or not, but that they are observing that we treat there's a lot of water loss, that we treat much more than we bill. And that's when you look at this letter that I think came in about 5:15 or something like that this afternoon, it's like, wow, that's. And we were planning on, we have been addressing that, but maybe not getting the kind of results that we want with the leak seekers and some other things to make sure we didn't have major losses in the distribution system. Anyway, it may be another use of the recovery plan dollars to look at a systematic water replacement, along with things that need to be done on Railroad Street and at the reservoirs, but to look at a water meter replacement plan or program. I kind of shy away from the word program, but I think that's probably what we're talking about. And
You
it
mean
used to-
all the water meters?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have between 40 and 50% water loss, and they're calling it a significant deficiency. So that's different from a violation where we have some, this is something they want as a top priority. So as Tom said, we use leak seekers. We have them come in a couple times a year and they have their sounding devices and find leaks, and we fix those. I had water meters installed at the sewer plant because they're a significant user. So things like that to make sure we're monitoring our water use, because at one point, city use was just, we didn't know how much it was. So we have now a better handle on how much we're actually consuming. City consumption plus billing, it's still around 40% that's unaccounted for. So we've been step by step kind of looking at where those other losses might be. One of the common ones is water meters. As they age, they slow down. So the water's going through the meter, but it's not clicking, and so it's not getting billed. I think that's one of the biggest areas. We go out and we replace meters regularly. People will call, and it's like, we'll come replace your meter, but it's not going to be to your advantage.
There's a pop
Yeah,
your bill.
because they've slowed down, and we put it in, and it's gonna be billed for what you're actually using. So that's one of the biggest ones that they want us to focus on is water meters, because it is a really common area where that water loss occurs, and it's not actually loss, it's just not being, tallied up.
Well, when you said that they did sounding stuff,
Yep.
how did they find a lot of issues in
we
that
found-
regard, or? Because I know we ran into that issue when we redid, I always mix up the names, 598 going south. Remember, we had that Civil War, basically, piping underneath there.
Yeah,
That's, and we, they will find, I'll say, 6 or 8 small leaks. But even a pinhole leak, that can be several thousand gallons a day.
Right.
So, I think we're gonna, my personal opinion is that it's gonna be a combination of things that we finally account for all of the small water leaks, from the curb box to the meter, that's unmetered. So if in my front yard I have a small leak that's not enough for the water, the ground to be squishy, but it's leaking 100 gallons a day or whatever, those are
Add
gonna
up.
be really difficult to find, but
Right.
they add up. So I think it's a combination of slow meters, small leaks, then small leaks that we'll be able to continue to identify and repair. Another one that they would like us to take a look at, and it's been suggested, is another source for fire lines, because they're not metered, but, with testing, and that one is the one I need to get some more understanding on,
But like on a major fire, they should be able to tell you what they use, like out of the towers.
Sorry, fire suppression lines in a.
Oh,
in
in a, okay.
a building, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
that
those-
would be,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so those are, as we've been looking at this over the last couple of years, really just like, where could we possibly be losing 40% of our, because if we had a break, that would be like hiding
Shows.
way obvious.
Right.
So we've been sort of chipping away at this, and now it's kind of like, okay, we're down to the
Well, I'm
replacement
wondering too
meters.
is now, I know there was, I'm gonna say a while back, as a general, idea, but, there was a big push at one time to drain, like street water, nah, that's the wrong word. Basically water off roofs and stuff. And instead of running them out into the yard and stuff, there was a big push to run them through, and some people did it illegally, obviously, in through their sewer lines in their homes. I'm wondering if how much that is contributing to that issue too,
but, yeah.
on the backside, you know what I
The
mean?
difference on the other side of it, it's not the slow meter, that's the taking your storm water and putting it into the sewer plant.
Right.
And, yeah, when there's a big storm, there's a surge that doesn't represent everybody rushing and taking a shower, or cooking, or
Right,
flushing.
well, that's what I was
So
wondering.
there's infiltration.
Okay,
Since you ask, I would say that our efforts to limit that infiltration, they haven't been real successful. There are different projects that the city constructed before the financial collapse, in which storm sewer projects were put in, and the affected streets never were required to tie in. So, it's kind of a different subject, but that's, those were the stormwater charges that really, they put in the pipe, but then you didn't have to tie in. It's a little bit like water, that you will run the line out, to press line out to the airport out there, and you don't have to tie in until you need to tie in. So there's a lot of cost there.
right,
But
right.
that's kind of off the specific subject. I think on meter replacement, the idea is there are many projects that could be done with that now reduced amount of money. I think that we stumbled on any type of meter replacement a few years ago because of how you would be able to I think the plan was that we would have borrowed money to put in all these water meters to go to remote metering, you recall?
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is a potentially a way at funding the replacement of those meters.
So if you didn't go remote, it wouldn't be as bad, but is that what they're telling you to do, go remote?
Not necessarily, no, but I think from a,
Practicalities.
Yeah.
I mean, as we sort of try to improve systems and it makes sense to go remote. We have them some places, but, you know,
Because I remember back then it was, what, $1.5 million just to do electric.
Yeah, that was right, I forget the exact numbers, but the biggest cost, oh gosh, you almost wish you hadn't asked the question, was the water meters. So that's, I think that to tie a few things together, that's something that they've observed. I'd say, in parentheses, if you feel like the ever-reaching hand of state government coming our way, you're not paranoid, that is kind of what's happening. How or whether or not we have this water loss due to slow meters, or any other reason.
Oh,
Any
yeah,
other
no, that's the reason
Unless
I brought that
unless
up.
our water is going out and causing an environmental problem, seems,
It seems.
we can't get adversarial, but it's like, thanks for the help. You wonder if the cost benefit of tracking down all these leaks is worth I think we're in the frame of mind that you always have to increase rates. If we're actually not metering all this usage and you don't lower rates, all heck's gonna break loose, because your bills are gonna go up. That part that we.
Exponentially.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I think that as you start to look at meter replacement, you're looking at how much revenue you will generate. And I think the final thing is that this once in a lifetime money, or I don't know, once every 20-year money, because I remember the Obama stimulus pretty well, but this is money that is, I think it's important to try to have it affect as many people as possible.
I agree, yeah.
Rather than one big project here or.
How many gallons of water a day do we go through?
about 1 million, give or take, depends, hot days.
So they're saying we're losing 400,000 gallons a day.
It's unaccounted for. I prefer to say unaccounted for, because
It has to be, because that much water would show up somewhere.
Yeah, that's when we
Somewhere.
started, we thought, well, you'll see that, just gushing out of a water tower near a main that is filling up a drainage ditch. And that's where that leak seekers, they start with the obvious big stuff, and we've worked, it really is more, as Nikki was describing, not just a drip, 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 but a small leak on a relatively large feeder line that can run up to a lot of unmetered, wasted water.
Right.
And I think, the problem with it is, they come this week, we find 6 leaks. Next week, it's down the road, another one pops, so we don't go back out and have them come for another 6 months, and in the meantime, we've popped, 10 or 12 or whatever.
Right.
So it's it's an ongoing thing. We have them come in a couple of times a year, and I think their devices are pretty sophisticated and can find most of what we have, but, it's like everything else we have, it's you fix it, but it's just an ongoing process to
That's a
identify
lot of
them.
water. Well, you think about it though, Mark.
Yeah.
It's, if you, I agree, that's a lot of water. The thing is though, if you take one particular item, say meters, okay, that might be.
Have a lot more billable water.
Maybe.
I think it.
Yeah, maybe not, but I think the amount of additional revenue, as I said a minute ago, you're gonna have to lower the rates likely, or you'll begin to do this over collection thing. That'd be my term. So that's, you were saying, I'm
Well,
sorry.
we have roughly 4,300 water customers. So, you know, it's just like Electric Mark, how they're categorized residential, commercial, then large commercial power. Similar to that, we have, you know, just regular residential meters and all the way up to the big daddies like the hospital has. So I actually dug out the old smart metering presentation from AMP, and I can't remember how, was it 3 years ago?
It's been a while ago.
And the quote they gave us, or the estimate, was for 7,300 meters. I don't know at the time how we didn't notice that, because we do have more electric meters than water meters. And that was for 7,400 from 765 to 1.1 million. So,
Yeah,
you know,
I figure it was up there quite a bit.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, I guess my point is, it'd be silly to bring up the idea if it didn't fit. If
Right,
you
no.
didn't, you're matching the resources. I'll jump the track a little bit. There have been some coverage of what the county wants to do with that money, some media coverage. And I think the takeaway from the back and forth over that is that, much like the Public Works Commission, where there's an informal agreement that they divide up Crawford County's money on a per capita basis. That you have to be careful with Public Works, because you can't literally divide it up, but that understanding's worked. Under this money, there's nothing that would stop the commissioners from dividing it up per capita. So I think that's gonna happen. My role in that, my worry is that there's a really strong desire to run water lines
Everywhere.
everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, if I was sitting up in Tyro or sitting up in the northern area and I had paid to get a water line to come down my road, and I had paid for that, and I paid for water, and I heard that they were gonna start giving it away to areas because they had failing wells, I think I'd be upset. So they can be upset, that's how they're being, perhaps, if it isn't divided up fairly, that's how they may be getting less than their fair share, whatever that means. But over here, I tell you what, there is nothing that is in Gallion's utility customers' interest to run a water line into Wyandotte County. It just doesn't make any sense, and so, you know, I'm raising heck about it to make sure that they divide it up on a more per capita basis. But I think one of the things is folks respond to that is, well, you have to have projects. And so since I heard that on Tuesday, I've been thinking, okay, let's take our allocation, our fair share, and turn it into some projects. So that was really the purpose of tonight. I thought, we'd have to do something with council to get the South Union thing handled. I think that's I think there may be even a start date with the low quoter. But since that was taken care of, this needing to think about what we do with that it's 1.2 million, so that in two chunks. Whether or not the private sewer dealing with those, or doing water, doing something with water meter replacement, those are.
Well, you mentioned too was the treatment, the treatment plant itself. Do we have an idea on what and I'm asking a ballpark, what that cost would entail?
We've gotten into it a little bit. We need to have the ferret tank replaced. That's a $50,000 fix. The lime feeders, certain things like that. The big one is the clarifiers. The estimates we got, gave us different options, whether we wanted to do stainless steel but
Right, for
around-
longevity and stuff, yeah.
around $800,000 for that. So for one.
For one, how many
And
do
we
we
have two
have?
clarifiers, so, they're big numbers.
Sure.
But those are, I think, 30 years old.
Right.
And, so there was a less expensive option and the more expensive option. And as we looked at it, it's, if we want to get 35 years out of it, lining them with stainless is gets the longer life, but.
30 seems about right, doesn't it, to you, Mark? About 30 years?
Yeah.
So once every 20 or 30 years, if you want to remain in the water filtration business, you're gonna have to make these investments.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
So-
should have, sorry, Tom.
No, that's it.
I should have the report tomorrow from the engineer that we hired for the Amon embankment.
I was gonna ask you about that.
We should have that tomorrow, so we'll have a better idea of what we're looking at. Because that one right now is like the giant question mark. What,
Are we gonna get any assistance, maybe from the state, since that's a highway too?
I think,
Or a roadway, I should say, it's not a highway.
That's a township road.
Well,
well,
it is,
I think.
No, not from the state, maybe from the county, and that's part of it. It's been a lesser discussion in the, among what the commissioners are doing to divvy up the money that
they got.
That would be a tough one because half's Moron County and half's Crawford County.
Yeah, it's the bridge part is, that's probably the county's bridge. So is this
Which
a-
county?
Huh?
Which county?
Crawford. It's their structure. So that's part of what the.
That's on
study-
county line, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So isn't the center line
I don't know. the
Morrow
answer to that.
County?
I think it's as I understand, it's Crawford County, Crawford County's or the township's responsibility to maintain that bridge. But I think what we'll find, that's Mike's question, we'll find out, stay tuned, we'll find out.
I figured that was.
Tomorrow's every day.
But I think it's gonna be a shared responsibility. In the meetings I've been referencing, the county engineer's been at most of them. It's a little bit unclear how those rescue dollars can be used in highway, how you can substitute lost revenue. So he's been mostly attending, I think if there turns out to be big structural issues, that moves up the list of projects that should be funded with money. So, anyway.
Yeah, and I think, right now, it's like 800 to $1 million for Powers. And that's just sort of a preliminary study that's been done and slope stability study. So there's some options there I think we have to discuss as far as lowering the water level, because the problem is the banks are too steep. The
Erosion.
the requirements over time have changed and the slopes have to be,
So if you cut the top of it off, you have
you have a
Right.
little bit more.
Slope requirement.
slope. So that's,
How deep is Powers anyway? Anybody know right offhand?
I don't know, but
I don't- yeah, I'm
the
not-
issue is you would reduce our storage capacity.
Well, that's what I was getting at with that.
Treated storage capacity. Until you have 2 or 3 months with no rain, a little mini drought, you don't need any storage capacity.
Yeah, that's
For the
true.
most part, that may be in how you fix Powers is probably reduce its available capacity.
What is 1 point of water? How many gallons?
I'm sorry, say that again?
1 point, like to a bill,
750.
gallons?
Well, I think it's going to be, it appears that we have several things that need to be addressed.
I think that's where we should use the money if we get,
Well, yeah,
that's what we need to do.
yeah, the ones that are going to hurt the worst, in that regard. Because if we something out there goes down or at the plant goes down, that's not an iffy, that's not a question mark, that's not it has to be taken care of like now.
And I think, what I'm I'm really glad we have Jaime on board. He's done a really good job, you know, this reporting deficiency. He's now doing everything online, so no more paper logs or anything like that. So he's really moving things along. He's already gotten some repairs taken care of. But, you know, in the process, of course, you always identify others when you have things dismantled. It's like, oh,
Right,
didn't know about
right.
that.
Well, I
So-
think, and again, I think the metering issue is one that's gonna have to be, for lack of a better term, systematically addressed.
I think one thing you should count on putting in there is a generator for the wastewater.
I don't disagree, Mark. You know, what has that now been 3 years ago?
Since
got
we even
some-
talked about that.
Some quotes on the one that's there. Can we make that work, or do we need to start from scratch? And those were pretty big numbers too.
How's the dynamic of the increase of cost? That's gonna play into all this too, big time.
As far as water rates go?
Well, no, as far as repairing
Oh, I
or
got you.
making the dollars
Materials.
that go as far as they can go with them, you know what I mean?
And with
Yeah,
the
you
cost
know-
of materials going crazy and.
Well, I know some of them have started to fall though, too, so I mean, it's,
I think that'll, it always goes up and comes down a little bit. It's probably my quick answer to the construction cost. I don't think we have a pending project that'll be really,
affected by it.
yeah, you know, I should back up. We've got the highway project. We'll get we'll get
Yeah,
a real direct answer on that. Prior to this, prior to these federal dollars, I think our only real plan was to look at rate adjustments, whether it's sewer or water, and you know, do, you know, as much as you can with as much as you can
right.
adjust the rates. My suggestion, I guess let me back up. I think 6 weeks ago, I was thinking about using these federal dollars to extend sewer line out to 61 and 30. Really good idea, but you begin to realize there's such a large need. The private sewers, the
Right.
EPA,
Right.
with their
And that's kind of what, we-
efficiencies and their recommendations. I mean, you don't ever, I don't think, whether you philosophically are in line or not with some of the stuff, there's nothing gained by fighting with the EPA. To somehow make a point about just, you know, our record keeping's good enough for us. And, it's probably not gonna be the case. So I think there are things in there that we can address using these dollars that would reduce the need to increase rates on either sewer or water side. Something to think about though is what the impact of putting in new meters, because you have to look at that pretty carefully. And if we judge that a lot of the loss of water isn't, you know, it's not leaking out, we're under metering, then we'll have to be careful looking at how
Mindful of
you
that.
back off the water rates so as to still be able to do the capital things. But I think that applies again on the sewer side, because that, of course, is a function. Sewer's driven by so if we're undercharging on water, then the units of sewer are less than as well, so. You have to talk to some of those nasty rate consultants and kind of say, well, that's a good way, you don't have to raise rates again. Just get that money anyways, and I don't believe in that. I think people know what the heck happens. They don't care
Yeah.
about the units on the car, they care about how much more that is, so.
right,
If we do, as part of the solution, come up with a meter replacement program, we have to think about, you know, how to avoid, not rate shock, but avoid, billing shock or, billing, what the heck they do to us, so. Anyways, we're a bit of ways from that, but I think those are a couple of, instead of trying to grow the system and reach out into other communities or out into, I'm certainly not against addressing the Jefferson Township area that be, you know, that have water and sewer, the Beardsley, Haman. But it's, I think we keep an open ear, and if some interest comes from those residents or the township officials, maybe we look at a way to use some of their money now that they have some, and some city money to get that accomplished.
Right,
So,
yeah.
I don't want to spend a bunch extending our system.
It's gonna come down to sooner or later that all this infrastructure that's in the ground is gonna need, I mean, some of it's 100 years old and more.
Nick, yeah, that's, you're right, Mark, that's what we're finding. That's what we found as we started to wrap our mind around this whole issue, and the yellow and the blue dots, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, these, and you look at when the homes were built,
Yeah,
heck, there was a well and an outhouse, you know, you're backing into that kind of condition, so I think fighting every fight over private, public, I think the approach should be to replace failing private with, you know, logical public. That's kind of, that'll require an ordinance change at some
right.
point.
Well, and I totally
Where we're
agree.
going.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's the way that, however it got to be where it is now, from now on, should be a good idea to be doing. I think for, if nothing else, to keep folks in the future not to have the headaches that.
But the agreements aren't there. I agree with what you're saying, the agreements aren't there. And the classic is the five of us that are here, it's like, as long as we all own the property, we all know whose shared
Right.
responsibility it is. When that starts to shift and change,
Well, that's the thing, people pass away, it's deeded over to somebody else, or they sell it or whatever, and some of that communication doesn't exist, and then suddenly, bang, something happens.
yeah, I agree. We don't need to prolong it, Mark, but I think back in 1911, or whenever that lateral was put in, that shared lateral, it's likely that the people who own the property then were so excited that they had, one of the trunk lines comes from the old middle school property. That's how this one that we've been talking about for a couple, ever had access to a sewer as early as it did. And that thing runs from, you learn a bunch of stuff thanks to Gary Jenkins and digging around a little bit. But that goes all the way down to the old Erie Depot, all the way down to the tracks down there. So you think in your mind's eye, it goes down the alley. And you don't know what kind of street there was out front. It sure as heck wasn't asphalt with curved gutters. You know, it was, so they went down this what became an alley. That's where they ran the sewer, and these properties were just 800 feet away. It's like, wow, it's the best thing that happened. I'm off this outhouse, you know.
Right.
If they ever get water out here, I can get off the well. So
Yeah.
that's really what, for me, it's kind of fun to, when you look at those areas, to associate them with when the neighborhood was developing. And, you know, I think people now expect the city will just come out here and fix that. And we try to, but if you will, back in the day, you were lucky to have a sewer to connect to, and then you can see the development happen. The houses went up after and that's in the specific case we've been talking about, but you can see it all over when you start digging around. So, if you like digging around in the extension of Galleon sewers, come on over. I'm way into it. Anyway, thanks for listening on all that.
Well, this is a special meeting, so our next meeting will be August 4th.
Regular meeting, yeah.
And can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that. Meeting adjourned at what time, Julie?
8:16.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we
Is it off?